we work on 4 major themes. The themes are integrating environment and development. So we do a lot of scientific work, but helping to integrate environment and development. We do people's participation and good governance across those levels. And we are working on poverty alleviation, sustainable livelihoods, which is addressing the fundamental poverty questions, and then sustainable markets and public-private partnership, which involves private sector and civil society, social business, and all of those. So those 4 elements for us is sustainable development in action. So we are looking at some of the very fundamental issue of knowledge management with respect to how to connect also knowledge for decision making. And decision making for us, a major decision maker is absolutely the grassroots village, farmer to village head, right up to the Secretary General of the United Nations and presidents of countries. So for us, each of those decision makers matter.
So you seem to work on quite a number of levels. What are the challenges of this approach?
Well, the biggest challenge is to communicate. Most of us, we live in our own little world. And the biggest challenge is to expose the larger world of interactions between ecosystems, development, environment, biodiversity, poverty, decision making, that they are one continuous flow. And many of them are in urban areas and working on urban questions, some in coastal areas working on coastal questions, some do just the science but not the policy, and most think tanks do science and policy, but do not do implementation. How that? One of our other learning over the last 20 years is that after 10 years of working in one of the poorest and yes, probably one of the most progressive and active in terms of civil society actions is Bangladesh. And where we have been asking the question is, how do you do science policy interface? Now in Western democracies and many other places where democracy function well, science policy interface, science taking into action people. But in system where democracy is in earlier stages of implementation, institutional and otherwise, the communities, the people will have to be brought in. So the way we approach this problem is through science policy people interface. So we do a triangular action of integrating that. In climate change world, in the world of adaptation, one of the highest amount of adaptation will be done in the water sector. And it's too much water, too little water, wrong type of water and wrong timing for water. These 4 elements combine about 60–70% of the various adaptations that we'll have to do. Is flood for too much water, drought, too little water, sea level rise, salinity intrusion, wrong type of water. And those are just examples. And wrong time of water, the rainfall not coming in time, not giving the best productivity from the land to agriculture. So future food security, food threats, water security, and all that remains a challenge across, not only in Bangladesh, across the world.
So do you think the lessons you've learned in Bangladesh are applicable to other regions of the world?
Lessons we learned are the systemic lessons are applicable to some of the areas or many of the areas. Definitely, I mean, Bangladesh is one of those places, is one of the highly densely populated, one of the poorest country in the world, with which has had about 6% growth rate for the last 15 years. So has done some very interesting miraculous activities. Its population growth rate has come from 2.1 to 1.45, which is quite miraculous. This has never happened in human history for the women who are mostly non-literate and malnourished are making major global decisions on population growth rate. Bangladesh is the world leader now in a home-based solar system for the poor. 500,000 household now has solar photovoltaic for the poorest, who can't even, had never seen a bulb in their lifetime, and now is having lights.
So one way of engaging private sector money is to encourage investment in renewable energy. Are there any challenges in encouraging private sector investment in renewable energy in Bangladesh?
Yeah, well, private sector has a very important role to play, and they may be able to bring some fund and technologies into the equation. However, let us remember private sector's central motive is profit and access. So they will do things which makes them the highest profit or good profit. Say in terms of water delivery, they will deliver water at a price at the central urbanized levels where people can pay. But the huge population that who cannot pay the so-called, what is the commercial price, not necessarily the fair price. Fair price will be far, far lower than that. But the commercial price, they won't be able to pay, so the private sector will not go there. Similarly, for the food security of the poor, private sector hasn't done much or will not do much. They might be able to innovate some new seeds, penetrated that to the market. Let us also remember that about good 1/3 of the global population are not in the formal market in the conventional sense of having enough spare cash to enter the market.
Let's look to the future for a moment. Where do you see Bangladesh in 20 years' time in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation?
By 20 years, not only Bangladesh, many of these present, the intensity of the problem will multiply. And there is a non-linear relationship between the amount of greenhouse gas and the consequent temperature rise to the impacts. Initially, it was sort of for certain amount of greenhouse gas, the atmosphere would take in, the oceans would take in, so we would not feel it. Now I think oceans acidification has already started quite seriously. The atmosphere is somewhat near getting saturated. Everything else will show up as show their thermal responses. Consequently, for a small amount of greenhouse gas emission, there will be much bigger climate impacts. Whether this, and most of it, in terms of development, it will come as a form of extreme event. An extreme event, whether they're cyclones, flood, disproportionate rainfall precipitation or shortage of that in terms of drought, and many of the what we saw in Pakistan more recently, which is unprecedented, the fires in Russia around Moscow, the floods in China, many of these, and of course cyclones in Bangladesh and floods in there. Some of the cyclones are 20-year events, but 3 mega cyclones, Ayla, Cedar, and Nargis, came within a period of 2 years. Now, this is violation of all the statistics known, and Nargis has killed 160,000 people in Myanmar. So, and then the whole question is, if that cyclone were to happen in Bangladesh, the death fall would be less than 1/20th of that, because Bangladesh has prepared itself with a cyclone warning system and a management strategy with huge number of volunteer workers. So it's a question of mobilizing your society. Bangladesh has been ahead of the game, and that is, partly responsible to research organizations, civil society organizations, government entities, government organizations who have already mobilized their communities and people, which the infrastructure for mobilized communities were there. Now the information of putting in climate change, and for ordinary people, you don't have to say about climate change. They don't talk in terms of climate change. If you ask a farmer, what's going on, he said, something isn't right. We don't understand. The rain isn't coming at the time we wanted. We are ready with the seeds, but we don't know how to sow because it is in the right time that's not coming. One of the other major challenge is the knowledge challenge, which is the present day farmers, and many of them are non-literate, have the wisdom and tremendous potential and experience of learning from their parents and grandparents, use that knowledge to feed the whole country, not only the whole country, across the world. That's what is happening. Unfortunately, the rapidity with which climate change is taking place and all the adaptation needs that will come within that is going to happen in the future. The previous knowledge will not have linear progression to the knowledge of the future. So a new knowledge system has to come in, and these non-literate people will not be able to as quickly understand that knowledge system. So there will be a knowledge gap. So, challenges are going to be enormous.